spirit and flesh. Well, what in the world does that mean? Psychology actually calls it the creator and the victim. It's the same exact concept. They just don't realize it. But we all know, like, you know, a person that, oh yeah, you're playing the victim, right? Or a person that's like, okay, no matter how many hard things I've had in my life, I'm still gonna live over here and create, and I'm gonna just leave all that stuff behind and heal it and live over here. So, did anybody know who Viktor Frankl is? You ever heard of him? Viktor Frankl? No, that's a different guy. So, way back in World War II, there was the Holocaust. You guys know about that? Concentration camps. So Viktor Frankl was a man from Austria who was a psychologist, and he studied the brain, and he taught like at colleges.
He was Jewish.
And he got taken to a concentration camp, one of the worst. And while he's there are all these armed guards are standing there that they will shoot him if he does anything wrong. There's maggots infested in the food. They're eating soup and there's bugs in it, like horrible conditions. There's fleas in the beds, and they're getting bitten, and they're not getting anything to eat, so they're like skin and bones. And he said he wrote a book after this experience, and he was looking at the different people that were there, and he said because of all of his psychology experience, and he had a relationship with God too, he could tell who was going to make it and who wasn't, based on what they were focused on. Could they live in that condition and see something beyond it? Or were they completely just in that immersed in that condition, and that's all they could see? And he said because those people had no hope and they couldn't see past that, those were the people that died first. And while he was there, he said God gave him a vision, and he saw it in front of his face every day, a vision of him going back after all the war was over and he was out of the camp, and teaching everything he learned to his students and all over the world. And he said because he held that vision in front of him every day, and he still was in miserable conditions, but he felt into that vision God gave him every day. And it kept him not only alive, but stronger than most people there. And somehow, because God works in mysterious ways, by holding onto that vision with faith, he says that's what got him out of there in the first place. And then he did go on to inspire and influence millions now. He's one of the most famous self-help authors out there. So that's super important for us, because what we're teaching you is really finding a vision and believing it with absolute faith more than what you see around you. That is what, if you can hold on to that, and that's where the challenge is, if you can feel into that every day as often as possible, that is ultimate faith, that God is faithful and he will draw it to you.
And here's something I want to cover, because this all sounds great. It's rainbows and unicorns. Everything's supposed focus on the good, but we go through hard stuff. Some people's lives are horrible through no fault of their own. Like, how do you reconcile those ideas? Like, is life kind of a crapshoot? Are you entitled to an awesome life, or is it just like, well, some people get it, some people don't? And so I wanted to cover a few Bible verses that actually speak to that. Like, are you one of the ones that gets to have an awesome life, or did you get the short straw kind of thing? And it's
because it can seem like random.
Right, it can seem totally random, and it can seem like, well, sometimes you just can't do anything about your life being horrible. But I want to look into the Bible to see, okay, what does God actually want for you? Because it's not just, well, some people get good stuff, some people get bad stuff. No, the Bible tells us that. Well, I'm not going to bother paraphrasing. Let's just go to it. Does somebody want to? Who's got their Bible? Who wants to read one?
He's got a phone, so he has a Bible.
Okay. Do you want to go to the first one? Sure. Okay. Go to this is a more obscure one, but it's perfect. Jeremiah 29, verse 11. Jeremiah 29, verse 11.
For I know the plans I have created for you, declares the Lord, plans for your welfare and not for your evil, to give you a future and hope.
Perfect.
Such a good one.
Yep.
All right, scratch it from our workshop, Melanie.
Good
scripture.
God He has plans for each one of us. It's not just, well, they'll figure it out. They get whatever they get. God has a plan for each one of us. And it's not some people get good stuff and some people get bad stuff. He says, I have plans and thoughts towards you. In my Bible, it says thoughts of peace and not of evil, to give you a future and hope. So he has good things that he wants for each one of us. It's not just up to chance. Who else wants to read one?
Well, can I say something about that?
Yeah.
I think that verse is interesting because people always put that on like graduation cards and like, all that. But it took forever for that promise to come fulfilled. Like it was years. Like I don't remember the exact amount, but I listened to a sermon and it was like they were told this, and then like 30 plus years later, and it's like, so you can, like, it's a promise, but sometimes you have to hold on to it way longer than you think about.
And that ties
And
in
so
directly
that's
to that
the
story.
verse where I'm always like, yes, that's true, but it takes a really long time sometimes.
And that's where we get tripped up, and we stop having faith, and we stop thinking, seeing that vision in front of us,
Yeah.
right? Because I mean, even for us, we've been trying to create something, a 200-acre waterfront property, and we're like, okay, that'll take like 2 years, right? Well, we have a 6-acre property, and it's not waterfront, but it's our first little step, and he knows, hey, this is what you need now. But yeah, sometimes it takes way longer than we think.
Yeah.
And that's
There-
where, that's
that's the
where
point.
immense faith comes in, because if, you get that promise and, 5 years go by and you're like, okay, God,
Yeah.
where you at? And then 15 years go by and you're like, okay, like,
I knew you
I'm
promised me
waiting,
this.
like, you promised me this, where is it?
Yeah.
20 years, 30 years, and it could go up to like a whole decade, and you're like, where?
Yeah.
I just went from 20 to, okay.
You went backwards, but that's
I
okay,
just
we
went
got it.
Solid point.
We got your meeting.
But that's just where faith comes in, because even though you don't see him working, that's when you still have to believe that he is.
Yes. It makes me think of Abraham and Sarah. They're like, okay, you said you're going to make a multitude, and how long was it until he even had his first kid?
It was a few years, I think.
I think it was longer than 2 years.
Long enough for them to try to work it out on their
With
own.
Hagar, yeah, it was a while.
Did you have something?
But the thing is like, yes, it's a long time, but if you really start understanding that there's so much God needs you to change and work and develop before you're actually ready for that step, then it's not like you think you're ready for this, right? But it's like,
Yeah.
it took me 14 years of really solid working on what I needed to be and
Yes.
who I needed to be able to step into it. And now it's like trying to be consistent with it is the next journey.
Yes,
And
you have to
so,
grow
yeah.
you internally.
Yeah, so you're very busy every day,
Yeah.
waking up and going, there's my vision. What am I working on today? It's one step closer to that vision, like with your properties. And that keeps you so busy and occupied. And you get little rests from God along the way. Like, yeah, you get some encouragement from,
Yeah.
oh, I learned this, and now this is a little bit more peaceful, or that circumstance. Yeah, it's,
And what did you say about if we had gotten that 200-acre property? You said we would
We would have drowned. We would never
We're not
been able
ready
to
to go.
handle that if, I swung for the fence
Because
and
we
if
want
we'd actually,
our goal is to create a community.
right.
But 200
yeah, like
acres.
that, like a whole
community,
village
that's
where
big.
like people live, where like all of this stuff is going on
Right.
all over the place, all the time. But yeah, we wouldn't have been able to handle that yet.
Don't worry.
Yeah.
And so God is good. The cool thing though that Carl said, we need to not just think of God's blessings, like the thing we're asking for is like, okay, the destination, the end goal, the like, okay, he finally gave me what I wanted. But to realize that even if it does take like a year or 5 years or 20 years, realizing that, you know what, through that process, before we get the thing we want, he's still blessing us and guiding us through that whole process. And that's the whole mindset that we need to shift, of like growing your bucket, to realize that whether or not we've got the things we're asking for, he's still blessing us in so many ways,
To hold
constantly
out that
through
he is
that.
faithful. So that was right, what you said was right in the story. I wanted to talk about Joseph, right? Because you said,
Perfect example.
yeah, right? he needed to grow into his dream. You guys know the story of Joseph? So, yeah, he had a dream when he was a teenager, sounds like, that all his brothers and his father would eventually be bound down to him. And he made the mistake of telling everybody that, hey guys, you're gonna be like, honoring me one day and I'm gonna be this king. They didn't like it very much, right? So he did not use that dream in the wisest way. He was wise. God gave him the dream. He showed him, hey, this is what's gonna happen. And he believed in it. But he wasn't the right person to have that yet. So his brothers threw him in the pit. You guys probably know the story. Threw him in a pit. He gets sold into Egypt as a slave. And it just keeps getting worse and worse and worse in there. He eventually goes to jail. And all throughout this time, he still is great at interpreting dreams. He set some people free from jail because of his interpretation of dreams. So that dream thing is still there. But the whole time, he had to hold out that God was faithful. Can you imagine like being in prison and it's like decades are going by and you don't see anything? It's like, okay, you have two choices there. I just made that thing up. That wasn't from God. Or God's actually not going to deliver that because I did something wrong. All our fear thoughts could come up, all the lies we talked about yesterday. I'm not worthy, that's why he didn't give it to me. I don't belong, whatever. But he had the faith and he kept holding that vision in front of him. Eventually, he interprets the king's dream. Do you have something you want to add to the story?
Oh, I was just gonna say that it's also cool that in those like horrible things that were happening to him, in each one, he also, because of his faith and his show of his faith, still kind of rose to the top of that situation.
Yes.
Like in the situation it was bad, but he kind of was able to work to the top of it.
Right. He did the best he possibly could in the situation he was in, which is what we're getting at, right? Like being okay with where you're at.
Yes. He got thrown in prison and eventually wound up running the prison,
Yeah,
that
he's
sort of
running
thing.
the prison, right, yeah.
He got led to the top and being like next to
Yeah.
the top Harper and then going back into prison.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
God can give you these peaks to show you that everything you're doing is getting in the
You're
right
on the right
direction.
track.
And then you still have more to
And he
learn,
could-
drop you down, you don't give up. But then he's like, I'll teach in prison. And he did that, and God rose him back up. So these
Yeah,
are-
and it goes back to those four choices that we're talking about. He had to be completely okay with where he was to be able to rise like
Yeah,
that.
exactly.
You using the word peaks kind of reminded me of something that I forgot about. A sermon where, it talks about, all the stories in the Bible that talk about people going to the tops of mountains to talk to God and they get what God is trying to tell them. And my youth pastor taught a sermon on you get what God is telling you at the top of the mountain, but you have to go through the valley to get to the other top. And so even though the valley, whether on the way down or whether it's on the way back up to the next mountain, whether it's rocky or flooded or there's lava running through it, you still got to go through that valley to get to what God is trying to tell you.
Yeah.
And it's all about faith because even though it feels like God is only on the tops of mountains, he's walking through that valley with you.
Something really similar that ties into that perfectly. The view is the best from the top of the mountain, but the valley is where all the fruit grows, which is really cool to think of.
And another part with that analogy you're using about the mountains is usually when you have the biggest valley, is right before, if you can get through that, right before the biggest breakthrough. The best view is at the top of the highest climb out of the depths. And that is so true. So sometimes when we're going for what we want, what we think God wants for us, you get slapped upside the head with something crazy you didn't expect. And if it seems worse than anything you've ever gone through, that you need to remember in the depth of that valley, this is my sign, actually, that as deep as this feels, it's always at least that high on the other side. So if we can remember during the big depths and valleys in our life that literally you're about to break through, it's so true. We've seen it so many times. My breakdown that I talked about yesterday, I literally thought like, man, my life is over and like this is the worst thing I could possibly experience and feel. I don't know how I'm ever going to put my life back together after that. Like our marriage was like falling apart and like everything is falling apart. And that literally, that was my turning point. I went from not fulfilled to purposeful and fulfilled after that. Like, there's always something on the other side.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
So do you want to get into the goals, or?
Really like that.
We don't use goals, we use choices.
Yeah, there's one more thing before we get into that. Did you guys have any comments before?
I like that quote that you said about the view being better on the peaks, but the fruit is better than God. Is that yours, or did you?
I've never heard
I don't
that before.
remember. I think I heard it in a sermon. I don't remember where it was, but it just stuck with me.
Yeah.
So one more thing before we get into like feeling into those choices is you have to be the person. You have to be it before you see it. You have to become the person God needs you to be before you're going to see that fruit in your life. So a lot of the time we're stuck in this mindset of, well, if I have this thing, then I'll feel this way. And we need to completely reverse that. You have to feel it first in order to receive. So just examples of that would be like, well, if I had $1 million, then I would feel wealthy. No, you need to feel wealthy first in order to not just have it, but be able to enjoy it, be able to give, be able to feel abundant. Because there's a lot of wealthy people out there that their lives are falling apart. They don't feel wealthy. They feel miserable.
if
And they're wealthy people that are happy as well.
Yeah, if somebody handed you $1 million, 6 months from now, you're actually going to feel exactly the same.
Yeah.
Even if you're living somewhere nicer, it's not going to change that thermostat unless you change it yourself.
Yeah, or another example is like, well, like if my parents didn't mess me up, then I'd be happy. Right? Everybody's parents mess them up in some way. Right?
The victim kind of.
Yes,
Right, yeah.
you can be the victim and say, well, I can't be happy because they messed me up. Or you can say, I'm going to choose to be happy anyways. And not in a forcey way, in a way where I'm going to choose that and I'm going to let God heal the stuff that's making me unhappy.
Yeah, my parents messed me up, but I can still have an awesome life.
Yeah. Or I used this analogy before, but you can say, well, I need to get a relationship and then I'll feel loved. No, because you can have a relationship and not feel loved. You need to feel that love and be whole and complete and have yourself connected to God in order to have a relationship that feels loving. And you're shaking your head.
Yeah, I think of something similar. Before I used to pray for, let's say I was going through something in my life, a trial, and I used to pray that God will take that away. But now I'm like, I know I have to go through this, and what do I learn from it? Not just pray that it's gonna go.
Yeah. Oh, we should share our story really quick. You just shared this.
Do it,
Our
do
relationship.
it. Share your
So
story.
we met at a church camp in the mountains, so romantic. And I did not want to go to this church camp. Like, I didn't know him. He was like 8 hours away. I didn't know anything about him. And I did not want to go to this church camp. And I didn't want a relationship. I was like, I'm fine the way I am. I have a lot of guy friends. I didn't want a relationship. So I felt complete in that way. But I didn't want to go to the camp, but my parents, my pastor, and my best friend, see, it always comes in threes. I was talking to her about that earlier. God works in threes.
Yes.
So often.
Yes.
Threes.
Yes.
3 people were like, Mary, you gotta go. Mary, you gotta go. So my dad finally just like bought all the gear. And I was like,
Here's your camping gear.
No, because I have to go now.
Yeah.
So I didn't want to go to this camp. And Aaron was in a situation where, do you want me to tell her you?
I can. I had just gotten out of a disastrous teenage stupid relationship, and I was like, okay, I'm done. I just need to
Done with
like
girls.
go. It sounds
Yeah.
melodramatic, but I'm just like, I need to just go to the woods and get myself straight and
right with
have
God.
yeah, focus on that relationship.
You had
And
just gotten baptized.
yeah, I got baptized earlier that year. I'm like, I got to reorient my life here because that was a disaster. And so that's why I signed up to this camp. I saved up and figured out how to be able to go and all of that. So I was like the opposite. I was really intentionally going
But the point.
to get away from everything.
Yeah, but the point I want to draw out here is neither of us felt like we needed it. We
Right.
felt
A relationship.
okay. Yeah, needed a relationship. I felt like I'm okay without one. And you felt like
good.
I'm okay. I got God, and I don't want to do that again. And you guys are all over this story because you
Yeah.
know you have to feel complete and of yourself, and
Yeah.
then the relationship just floated in. I didn't like him at first. He was weird.
And she was judgmental and didn't have,
I was prickly, I mean, even more than I am now, if I still am, but I was like, you know, when you're wounded, so you have defense mechanisms.
Oh,
I was
yeah.
always trying to like be funny and like poke at somebody. Really, it's because I was hurt inside. I don't know what.
I could tell she had a marshmallow inside all the spines.
Yeah. So, and his sense of humor is hilarious, but I didn't appreciate it because I thought it was too nerdy, and I didn't want anybody to know I was nerdy too. So, anyways, yeah, we just kept ending up in the same groups at this camp, and I got every other person's number there except for his. But one night, we had this night under the stars, and all the girls had like sleeping bags lined up in a row. I don't know why a church camp let this happen, and all the guys had sleeping bags all lined up in a
So
row.
you were like close enough to be able to
head.
talk.
And I'm like, what were they thinking? But anyways, I was like head to head with Aaron, and I didn't know him very well, and I didn't like him. And one by one, everybody kept was falling asleep, and he and I had the most amazing conversation. We stayed up for hours and hours, and talked about like all the deep things in life, all the things, not small talk stuff. And I was like, wow, somebody that's on my level with this stuff, and like that I could connect to. And that was like a turning point. Not just my level. I mean, like I never like to talk about trivial things. I always like the deep stuff. And so like after that night, it was just, we knew there was something there, but he had already sworn off girls. So what you were like, no, what? How did you?
I was like, okay, I don't want to just like jump right back and good, another relationship. And so I was like seriously conflicted, not wanting to like escalate this. I'm like, she's cute, she's smart, she's witty. No, back off.
So we're waiting on the last day, at the airport, and I still haven't gotten his number or anything. And he literally waited until they were calling my flight. They're like, okay, flight 103. And I'm like, okay, I guess this is it. And I stand up, and he's like,
Finally, I was going back and forth. I'm sitting there like, I don't want to get back in line. I don't want to like push this relationship. That's not why I came here. But she's really nice, and I'd be stupid to not have anyway to get sort of back and forth,
so I
back
stand
and
up,
forth.
and he's
Finally, I'm like, hey, by the way, what's your number? So maybe sometime we could talk.
And I was like, and I hadn't really all the way admitted I liked him, but so as my plane is taking off, and I'm like, wow, I see the mountains fading off into the distance, and my best friend is sitting next to me, and I was like, looked out the window, and I'm like, I'm really good at this now.
Did you hear them?
Yeah, we exchanged numbers. And so I had social anxiety up with like this whole time. That's why I didn't want to leave him. So when he did finally call me, I had to make myself take that action to pick up the phone. The first time they called me, I was at my aunt's house, and I was like, okay, hi, hello. But anyways, so God can bring something into your life. You still have to take those action steps that you might be afraid of. But yeah, the whole point for that story is just to illustrate, once you're feeling the feeling already is when you can actually have the thing that you desire and that God desires for you.
Thanks for sharing that.
Yes.
Thank you.
So yeah, let's talk about these choices a little bit more. We are not going to go for an hour and a half today.
Yes. So I recommend you guys write these down. Basically, for our entire course, the only way to really get anything out of this course at all in your grand scheme of your life is to write down the choices, not just these, but the ones you'll create yourselves. Write them down and do it and practice what we teach you every day. Okay, 4 core choices. So the first one
What are you saying?
is I choose a life I love. I choose a life I love. I choose a life I love.
And it's not choosing to make your outside circumstances so awesome that you have to love your life. It's the choice to the life that I have, I'm going to be super content and grateful for.
Yes.
And
this is not one thing to bring into the verse. It's not just a head choice. We're gonna do an exercise with this in a minute. You're gonna realize that this is actually a heart choice. You make the decision here, but you feel it in your heart. And where was I going with this? I choose a life I love isn't just like, I'm gonna just tell myself, I choose a life I love, and I force it.
life is awesome.
Yeah, right, because if you're not used to feeling that you love your life, you're gonna have, when you try to like, okay, what does that feel like? You're gonna have some resistance, you're gonna have old emotions coming out, you might not be able to really feel it because you're not practiced in feeling it. We practice feeling everything. If you're like, okay, you're anxious, so you practice feeling anxiety all the time.
and you're really good at it.
You're really good at it, right? We don't think of everything we're feeling as a practice. So we need to start practicing. What is a life I love? What is being in love with life? Because God is life, right? What does that feel like? And if you're not used to it, it's going to feel hard. So that's what we want you to be starting to tune into these every day. And eventually, you're going to tune into them and be like, oh, yeah, I feel it. I feel it. Life is good.
The more you practice, the easier feeling that way all the time gets. And the Bible verse, New Testament to the New Testament church, to the Christians that Paul is writing, and he says, rejoice always, in everything give thanks, for this is the will of God in Jesus Christ. And it's this exact thing. Whatever's going on, whatever your life looks like, it's 2 Thessalonians 5, 16 and 18. Rejoice always, in everything give thanks. It's the same idea of just love where your life is right now, because even if stuff's hard, even if things are complicated and up in the air, you can still choose to love that because God's working out whatever He's working out right now.
And one thing to point out though is it does not mean that you don't want to change the situation that you're in. That's where it can get a little confusing. You can love your life now while you're in prison. And sometimes when you're in your parents' house and you have abuse going on, you're in prison, right? You can still choose to love
Change your circumstances.
But you can still choose to change your circumstances.
Right, so so that's the thing, I think, sometimes we hear about Paul saying, be content. Content doesn't mean that I'm good right where I'm at, I'm not moving. It's a journey. You realize there's an ultimate goal that you're heading towards, but you're content on where you're at in that journey.
And that's what we're getting at. Today is all about how do we be content where we're at. We need both. You can be 100% content and satisfied with where your life is now and still desire to create more.
Right.
You have to have both.
Right.
Yeah, great.
I'm sorry, can you repeat what verse that was?
Yeah, of course. 2 Thessalonians chapter 5.
First Thessalonians.
It's first?
Yeah. It's
You're
First
right.
Thessalonians.
My headache. It's
Can you be our
perfect.
fact checker?
Perfect, yeah. Sorry.
She's
first,
good at that.
1 Thessalonians 5, 16 and 18.
And there's also verses in the Bible where Paul is saying, like, I've learned to be content in all things, in shipwrecks, and feeding, like, this guy was like tortured and in prison and abused, and he said, I've learned to be content in all things.
It's not like he's going out of his way to get shipwrecked. I'm not sure how you do that, but it's like whatever's going on, I'm still grateful that I'm on this journey.
And we always, like we said, like you were bringing out, we have to have this foundation, but we also have to create, because God is a creator, and we are supposed to be like Him. We are creators as well. Yeah.
One of my favorite, I guess it's a whole chapter, it's 2 Samuel 22. It's David's song of deliverance.
Oh, yeah.
And it's his prayer to the Lord, you know. I don't want to
Want to read it?
You want me to read the whole thing?
I don't even know what it is, so
Okay.
maybe.
Somebody who's better at reading, I don't want to read it.
What is it?
2 Samuel 22.
Yeah, let's do it. Yeah, please do.
It's pretty long. If you want to read part of it,
If it's super long, we can.
I don't know, I just really like it. I don't know, it's,
Yeah, I'm curious what it
it
is.
pretty much just covers everything.
Of how God delivered him.
Well, yeah, he's just praying for deliverance and wisdom.
The Lord is my rock, my fortress, and my deliverer, my God, my rock, in whom I take refuge, my shield and the horn of my salvation, my stronghold and my refuge, my salvation. You save me from violence. I call upon the Lord who is worthy to be praised. I am saved from my enemies. It goes on and on.
Okay, so praise for deliverance.
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, thanks for
and
mentioning that.
it's in here. It's all present tense. These are things that God does. It's not that eventually He'll do. It's not that I hope He's going to do this. It's like God does these things actively.
And this is
all
written
the
by a
time.
guy that was hiding in the caves, afraid for his life. He had armies like chasing him. David's another great example of God promised I'm going to be the king. Why am I sitting here hiding in a cave? You know?
I wrote down, I love the opportunities that I see for growth. I love the talents that I have to get there. I love the potential I see in the troubles around me. So it's like I'm loving the specific components of now that can get me to where I need to be,
Yeah.
right? So I think that's what Paul did. He was like, I am at peace in all things, because I think he saw that all things were growing and leading to something else.
Working together.
Even if it's a terrible thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's what you're saying.
And all of this, and the key to all of this is feeling it. Feeling with your heart the end result before it happens, and holding on to that no matter what.
Yeah.
All right, you guys have any other comments about that first choice? We're gonna tune into all of these in a minute, because they all feel really different, which is really interesting.
Yeah, practicing each one of these is like a totally
Right, I
different
think,
thing.
okay, okay, oh, great, okay.
I think I was thinking about it, and I understand the concept of like loving your life, right? Like, I can kind of get it, but I feel like for me, it's not so much love as like it's like it's being at peace with where it is and being like content with that. Because there's things in my life that I don't love.
Yeah.
And it's really hard to like look at it and be like, oh, I love where I'm at. It's like, no, I don't love where I'm at, but I know that this is where I am.
And that's
And
kind
so
of
I
what
can
we're
have
bringing
peace
out.
in that.
That's
So,
another really good way to put it.
Yeah,
And that's what-
I have a hard
Jason
time with the word love. I'm like,
Well, that actually,
It's hard.
I hear what you're saying, and you're right in what you're saying. However, saying you have a hard time with the word love is indicative that that choice is probably something you really, really need to make and feel into and see what happens with it. But what you're saying is 100% right. When we say I choose to love my life, I choose the life I love, we're saying I choose to be content in all situations. I choose to rejoice always. Doesn't mean you like every little situation that's happening, but you accept it.
Yeah.
It's almost like accept peace, accepting. Doesn't mean like, oh, I love that I'm like, these are
I'm unemployed, it's great.
It's more of I'm at peace because I know God's got this. Yeah. That's a great little
Yeah,
nuance.
that's a good way to put it.
Yeah.
I feel like you can also love, like, you don't have to love every part about your life to love your life. Like, if you think of, like, if you love someone, you're not gonna like every part about them. They're gonna do things that annoy you and make you mad. But you still.
Really, I haven't noticed anything.
You're still in newlywed bliss for the
Like, you
next
don't-
50 years.
Yeah, everything doesn't have to be amazing for you to be like, I love this.
Yes, absolutely.
So-
I mean, Viktor Frankl that's why I use that analogy. Do you think he loved, like, eating food with, like, worms in it? I'm like, no.
Yummer.
Have you ever tried it?
I mean,
So-
then I can tell you try it, right? But no, that's
Yeah, the idea of
great
acceptance
nuance.
and peace is
Yeah.
this same idea.
You
guys
can love
got
it. You can love life. It's more about loving life. God is life. I love that. And all these little things I don't like in my situation. You got to differentiate life versus your outward situation. Those are two really different things. Life is God. Life is life source. I love that I have breath in my lungs. I love that I'm here and I can do work.
That I'm alive and God's
That is
working.
very different with your external situation. The external situation is what trips us up. And that's what you're saying, like, I don't like all this stuff I'm seeing. And this is the weird, almost like magical seeming part, is if you can override and ignore those things that you don't like and just accept, okay, that's there for now, and cling tighter to God and just be in that love with Him, those things will transform. Sometimes without you even trying.
Mhm.
And sometimes He'll tell you the specific action steps to get out of it.
And sometimes,
You want to say something?
well, I was just gonna say, and sometimes when you accept something like that, a blessing, something out of the blue sky will come in and change that without you
Yeah.
doing a thing.
Opportunity flooding in. What were you gonna say?
I was just gonna say, and then you have kind of Paul's perspective of, I take joy in the trials because you love even the difficulties in your life for what it's growing in you, and that it's gonna help you get to even more joy.
Yeah, that's a really like higher perspective too,
Yeah.
right? Because it's like, how can I rejoice in
Yeah.
trials?
Yeah.
Once you're able to really see every valley and trial as refinement and God taking you to where He wants you, you can actually find joy in that. Doesn't mean they don't hurt. They're painful still, but you know that you can have joy because God's bringing you up out of something. Yeah. Should we go on to the next
Yeah.
one? All right. Choice number 2. I choose to live my true nature and purpose. I choose to live my true nature and purpose. Choose to live my true nature and purpose.
Just the questions I can.
Yeah, sure.
Are you gonna expand on these tomorrow too? Or,
No, I just want you to list these, and yeah, you just have each one without any. Because you're gonna be tuning into these every day. And if you guys choose to follow some of the stuff we're teaching, the practice that we're teaching,
Yeah, this is
every
like
day,
this
tune
is a
into
practice
this. So you
regimen.
kind of just want to list for yourself. You can write notes almost on a different page. Okay, so I choose to live my true nature and purpose. This is all about our gifts and our blueprint and everything we've learned with that test. Who did God make me to be at my deepest essence? Not who do I think I am, what does my flesh think I am, but who am I at my core and what are my gifts, my true purpose. And it's unique for each and every one of us.
And realizing that every single one of us has a true nature and purpose. You may not know what it is, you may feel like you're floating, but ultimately this is just like, this is a fact for every single person. In Ephesians 2 and verse 10, it says, "We are his workmanship, created in Christ Jesus for good works, which God prepared beforehand so that we should walk in them." This idea is that God created each one of us. It's not like he's like kicking us out of the machine and we're the same as the next one and the one after that and the one after that. Like, even if it doesn't feel like it, he literally paid close attention to how he made each one of us, because he gave us a specific purpose and a very unique, like, how we're wired, our nature. It says that the good works that God prepared beforehand, that we should walk in them. There are things that he's prepared us to be able to do that he wants us to do. And those things are figure-outable. Those are things we can determine that he wants us to do, that are like ingrained in us.
Has anybody here, curious, I know you have, and if you want to share, you can. Has anybody here had an experience where they got a glimpse of a vision of what God did preordain beforehand, that he wanted you to do, wanted you to be, your purpose, and then you actually saw it play out? You ever like seen anything like that? Are you comfortable sharing any of your story?
I will on where I was baptized.
Okay, great.
Easter week of 2022, I was locked up in jail and ended up having an overdose. And the Lord came to me and pretty much told me everything that was going to happen in the following 2 years. Even down to where I was going to be baptized. He showed me the image of the creek that I was baptized in a few months later after that. But it was almost exact. Like,
you saw it like
the image that I've seen,
picture.
While I was in jail, and the image that I've seen as I was walking to the creek where I was going to be baptized was exactly the same.
That's amazing. Well,
It is absolutely incredible.
yeah.
Yes.
And I had this experience for the first time when I was in the hospital and that breakdown. I was having all these visions that were scaring me, but so many of those actually, see, I didn't know God could talk to us that way. I never was taught that, so I was kind of freaked out. But I had one vision that was really, really, really real, and it was of a community of people of like mind. People were flocking to it, and it had this golden force field around it, like God's protection. And I knew that that was what he wanted us to create. We haven't figured out how to do the golden force field yet. But, symbolic, like this is a safe haven, and people are coming to it to learn. And I knew that it was about spiritual and personal growth that this community was supposed to be. And ever since then, I wrote it off at first, but then it kept coming back, And sometimes when you're in that deepest valley, as you shared this with me too, when you're in that depth, sometimes that's when he's going to reveal these things to you and speak to you and show you things. So the weirdest thing with that is I had that vision, but I kept it to myself for a couple of years about this community, this personal growth community. But one day, Aaron and I went out for coffee a couple of years after that, and I was like, hey, so let's do this exercise about finding like your purpose. Because that's fun for me. He's my guinea pig for most of this. So we're at this coffee shop and I'm like, okay, here, close your eyes and I'm gonna like walk you through this thing. We'll see what your purpose is. And I had never told him a word about what I had made. And got his eyes closed. And he's like, huh, I see like this, and we're in the mountains. And I see this like community. And then I go over to the next, there's another one on the next. But they're all like these communities filled with people like mine. And he has his eyes closed still, and he didn't know I'm sitting across the table from him, crying. Like, I'm like, whoa. You know, you have that moment where it's like out of a movie. It doesn't seem like it's you. It's like flashing before you. Like, what is this? When he opened his eyes, I'm like, okay, I had the exact same vision in the hospital. Whoa. So that was like confirmation. But we had never had experiences like that before until we genuinely started not just having the head knowledge and reading just the Bible, but developing a relationship.
Yeah,
We've got
that two-way communication.
Anybody else have an experience like that? Maybe not quite
That's
so
how all
crazy.
this came about for me, for
Yeah.
sure. Yeah.
Oh, with Jordan's way.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I saw myself on a stage presenting to a bunch of people.
Wow.
And there was just this feeling of love and connection, and everybody felt really empowered. And then I come down off the stage, and then we all just sit together on the floor, which is a big reason why we always try to sit on the floor.
Yeah. Oh, that's so cool. So you saw it at the time.
Saw it, yeah. And then other people started validating it, saying, hey, I've seen this thing, or I had a dream about you doing stuff, or you need to do this. And it was like at least 2 or 3
Corroborating.
Yeah, that's
really
helpful.
fast,
'Cause-
yeah.
That's amazing.
Because you want to know, was that from God? It gives you so much evidence. That's
Yeah.
like, I love that.
So, when about two issues ago, when I first, I don't know, I went to youth camp and I was having all these spiritual experiences. And then one day, God just told me, I was praying and I was deep in this prayer at youth camp. I should start there. I was deep in prayer at youth camp. And it was sometimes when I pray, I know that it's not necessarily coming from me, but it feels like God's praying through me and giving me the prayers that I should be praying.
That's cool.
And I can't control it, it just starts going. And I was in the midst of one of those. And it was really powerful, and I was in a battle, and then he was, after all this prayer and stuff, I was just telling him, like, talking to him and things, and then he tells me 17. And I instantly knew, he just said 17, and I instantly knew that meant I'm supposed to get baptized at 17.
Huh.
And I was like, okay, because I had never even thought about baptism or cared to do it myself, so I never had. And I was like, I don't know, I don't really see the purpose in it. It's not that, like, I see it's important for other people, but not, I don't need to. And then he was like, 17. And then the year starts going by, and I was telling my parents, like, I just turned 17. I'm supposed to get baptized at 17. Maybe I could do it on my 17th birthday, and I kept trying to figure it out. And then I turned 17, didn't happen. I was so hung up on the place and the people who needed to be there, and everything had to be perfect, and all these things, and I was trying to figure it out. And then a whole year goes by, and I go to a youth camp, and this youth camp happens like a week before my 18th birthday. And I'm like, I never got baptized. It's whatever, I don't know what happened. And then, I'm like, it's just not the right time ever. And I had been telling myself for years, I'm never going to get baptized at a youth camp.
Anytime we say I'm never going to do something, watch out.
Yeah.
Because you will make sure you do it. I said I'm never going to have kids.
Wow. So that's a big one. I go to this, I'm at this youth camp, and then they go, does anybody want to get baptized? And then I was like thinking about it, and then God just put it on my heart, like, and I was like, maybe. Still like, maybe. I don't want to get baptized at youth camp, but maybe. And then so I talked to one of my favorite people, Brad Brown, who's my camp dad. I was talking to him, and I was like, you know, I don't know, I kind of want to get baptized, but I'm not sure if I should. Do you think it would be the right time? And I was talking to him, and I told him the whole thing that happened in the 17th, and he was like, wait, you don't know if you should get baptized? And I was like, yeah. He said, but you're supposed to get baptized at 17, and your birthday's soon. And I was like, yeah. He goes, I think you answered your own question. And I was like, so I looked into it, he gave me some Bible verses, and then it was just a whole thing. And I was like, okay, I guess I'm going to do it. And another thing is I didn't want to get baptized in a tub. I wanted real water. No, it didn't happen, but I ended up having Brad and Erica Bronze baptize me, and they called in my camp parents. They baptized me. It was a very important experience and absolutely amazing, and I just never saw it going that way.
Wow. And he took you through the last week or something before the time ran out with that vision. I feel like he does that so often. He like makes you wait until the 11th hour to say, hey, are you still gonna believe? Are you still gonna believe? Time's running out. Like, it looks really bad. That's so cool.
I had an experience, and it actually started here. We came here for youth camp in our first year. It was like 90-something degrees outside, and it was the last night of camp. You know, emotions are just all up in the air, and even though it was hot and we were all sweating, our youth pastor decided to do a bonfire anyways. So we sit out of the cabin and we start with, you know, upbeat songs, and it slowly goes down, and then we start what we call popcorn prayer, where someone will pray, and instead of, when they get to the end, instead of saying amen, they'll just stop talking. And then if someone else in the circle or the room feels called to pray, then they'll just start praying. And then instead of saying amen, they'll stop. And after that, I got super emotional, and I started praying, and it just kind of all like flowed through me. And I think I prayed for like 15 minutes straight.
Out loud.
Yes, out loud, in front of everybody at like 9:30 at night. And I was like bawling my eyes out during this. And so after everybody kind of finished, everyone was like, well, we want to go play Frisbee, whatever. So everybody got up and kind of went and did their own thing, and I stayed by the fire. And at this point, it was just burning coals. And I'm like on my knees and hands, bawling my eyes out, just praying and praying and praying. And then some of my friends come up and they, you know, kneel beside me, put their hands on me. And one of my friends put her hands on me. And it sounds fake and it sounds like a movie, but it was so real. As soon as she put her hand on my shoulder, it was like almost like a daydream, but it was so vivid. And it was me and her on the side of the cliff, and it was me talking her off this cliff. And just a lot of things happened. And as I was praying, and then I came back and prayed, I was like, what does this mean? Why did you show me that? What is this for? And about 6 months later, she called me. She was bawling her eyes out. She was on the verge of suicide. And I sat there and I prayed with her over the phone. And, you know, I talked with her and I pulled her off the edge of the cliff, even though it wasn't a real one. It was metaphorical in the, you know, in the sense of the cliff and whatever, but I talked her off of that. And then it took a conversation that looked like this about a month after that when I realized that's what that vision was. It was the vision of me.
It didn't click right away.
It didn't click right away because I was so caught up in the emotions, because I was like, my friend is about to leave this earth. So I was doing everything in my power, everything in God's power through me to show her that she was loved, that she was cared for, that she was supported. And I pulled her back out of that. And then we had a conversation in a small group, and I was like, oh, that's what that vision was. And it was crazy.
That's so profound. Wow. That's amazing. Thank you for sharing that. Wow. Sometimes he gives us visions that we don't even realize when they come to pass. Sometimes we just kind of like forget about them. Wow, I love that.
Yeah.
I don't know how we got onto all these awesome stories, but I love it when this happens. All right, anybody else have anything they wanted to share?
Yeah, we
Okay,
got more.
all right.
Closing
Ready
down
for
lunch
this one? Yeah.
again. That's okay though.
All right, let's do, what's the next one? Do we do two?
Yep.
Okay, the third choice. I choose, this is the really wordy one, I choose to be the predominant creative force in my life. I choose to be the predominant creative force in my life. You guys need it one more time? Predominant creative force. I know it's a mouthful. Yeah. Predominant creative force. And there's a reason we phrase it like that.
Wait, are you saying that? I don't know.
What choose to be the predominant? Predominant?
Yeah, predominant. It means like the primary.
I can't stand it. I can't
Creative
stand
force
it.
in my life.
That's why people-
No, it's okay. It's a big
It's a
no. The predominant creative force in my life.
And what this really comes down to is choosing to take ownership of the choices you make in your life and not just kind of go with the flow, be the victim.
Creator versus victim. And when we say the predominant creative force, we're not talking about, oh, God's not the strongest force. No, He is the umbrella over all of this. But within Him being the creator, He gives us freedom of choice.
He puts us in charge of our own lives so that we can make those choices. We're not robots. We're not, anything like that. Like, He wants us to make those choices. That's the point.
So let me just go to the words again really quick. So predominant just means the primary. I am choosing. I'm not letting everybody else choose for me. I'm choosing. Creative force is each of us. God is the creator. He spoke the world into existence. He created an awesome garden. And then He said, hey, Adam, create some stuff here. Tend it. Make it cool.
So you tell me that if somebody tells me bad things about myself, it's not actually who I am?
You can choose to accept that or not.
So if you do feel that somebody's telling you all these terrible things about yourself, and you feel that way, then you have chosen to do that. Is that what you're saying?
Yep.
Okay, just wanted to clarify.
Good point. Yeah, so if somebody's saying, you're a reject, I don't like you, you do choose by accepting. You can, when somebody says something like that, or implies you're unworthy, all the lies we talked about, you can either let that in, and you might not need to let it in, but you might already have that light planted in you, so it's easier to get reinforcement, right? And then you're choosing by not choosing. To create, you're choosing to accept something that's not true. Thanks for bringing that up.
And the verse that goes with this, like God gives every one of us this choice, and you can either choose to take it or you can choose to not choose, which is a choice by itself. But in Deuteronomy,
choose to be like, I'm just a victim to whatever's happening around
right,
me.
you can
It's
choose
really
to
easy to do that.
you can choose to let stuff happen to you, or you can choose to take that ownership and make your own choices. In Deuteronomy 30, verse 19. God is speaking here. He says, I call heaven and earth as witnesses against you, that I have set before you life and death. I've set before you blessing and cursing. Therefore, and he's not like, oh, choose whichever one, doesn't matter. Therefore, he's given us this choice. Therefore, choose life, that you and your descendants may live. So he gives us this choice, and then he tells us which one to choose. It's not like there's no lack of clarity here. He's like, here are your two options. Choose this one.
Yeah. All right, we're gonna move to the next one pretty quickly, unless you guys have any comments on that one. All right, last one, the fourth choice. This one's pretty simple, but really important. I choose health and vitality. I choose health and vitality. Because without a healthy body and a healthy mind, not going to be able to do all the things God wants you to be able to do. He has a big purpose, mission for you. It doesn't mean you have to, you're in a wheelchair or you have a disability, like my daughter, she has leg braces. Sometimes you're choosing a healthy mind when your body has something that you know isn't going to change in this lifetime. And sometimes when you accept that disability can be the very thing that God will use you for. You guys know Nick Vujicic, is that how you say his name?
Yeah.
Nick Vujicic. So he is a motivational speaker who has no arms or legs. He was born without arms or legs.
That guy,
Yeah, he has this little flipper foot.
I know.
Yeah.
And he hops around on stage, and he's the most powerful speaker you'll ever hear. But he went through like, a stage in his life. I think he was 9 years old when he tried to commit suicide for the third time. He tried to drown himself in the bathtub because he's like, why was I born like this? What is this? And his parents were Christians. They were pouring love into him. They were trying to show him everything. But he had to go through that huge valley. And God used his very disability, his health challenge, to do what he's doing around the world today, which is he saved thousands of teens from suicide.
And like he's married, he's got kids.
He's got 4 kids.
Yeah.
So so he chose. He did make a choice. He didn't say, "Oh, I want arms and legs to grow back." Come on, God. Like he's like, "Yeah, I still pray for arms and legs, but that'd be nice."
That'd be cool, but here we are.
He chose to have health and vitality. He chose to be energetic and vital, and to have a healthy mind through all of this. He could have chosen to be like, even if he didn't end his life, he could have just been like a victim his whole life. So I choose health and vitality, and the body is meant to heal itself. Bodies are meant to be perfect. That's what it was in the Garden of Eden. And God created it to heal itself, but it's sin that blocks it from healing. And sin is this fancy Bible word, but really it's a lot of what Carl talked about already. It's negative emotions, it's fear, it's anger, all of these things, all of the lies we believe about ourselves and not worthy. Those are the sins that actually block us from healing mentally, spiritually, physically. So, did you have something to add to this one? Yeah. You can't do the work God's calling you to do. You don't have that. So it's kind of like a backup, like a foundational thing. Okay, you didn't have anything for this?
Well, I can go through.
Well, there's the scripture where Christ talks about, and he came to heal all type of sicknesses and all type of diseases, separating the body from the mind, right? So when we choose to be healed, we have to choose to not just heal, but create, like you're saying. So we have to grow something to replace the void of lack of health and choose vitality. So improve your mind's body, your health's body, your awareness, your servitude, your work. It's an important component.
And God created our bodies to be healed, but because of the world that we're in, that doesn't always work. So he also created the spiritual backup. In Psalms, it talks about this in so many places, but in Psalms 30 verse 2 it says, "O Lord my God, I cried out to you, and you have healed me." It's that exact thing where okay, stuff's wrong, things aren't the way it should be, but you can still go directly to God and he can still heal you.
And I mean, there's amazing stories about this. I'm giving you so much wisdom that I haven't even come up with all of this myself. That it just sounds like, okay, yeah, I choose this stuff. But literally, there are people that have done this process of I choose health and vitality. And they feel that and believe it every day, believe God for healing. There was a lady who got her thyroid removed. It was out. It was I think it was cancerous or something like that. She focused on health and vitality and just believed that God would take care of her. And guess what? She actually grew a new thyroid. Oh. I didn't know that was possible.
Never happened.
Right. They did scans and they're like, what is that? I thought you had your thyroid removed. Yeah, so there's some, and that doesn't, I'm not gonna say that happens every time, but if it's in God's will and you cling on to that end result, and you feel that every day and believe it, there's crazy stuff that can happen.
Did you say Psalms 30?
30 verse 2, yeah.
So those are the core 4.